Thomas Tuchel's Tactics Explained. Today we're going to be diving into the German tactician's shape, formation and how he likes his sides to play. We're going to be diving into Borussia Dortmund, PSG, Chelsea and Bayern Munich. Of course, if you are new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video. But anyway, let's get this party started. Born in West Germany on the 29th of August 1973, Thomas Tuchel had a 6-year career as a professional footballer before having to retire aged 25 following a serious knee injury. Hailed by fellow managers like Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola for his tactical approach and style of play, Thomas Tuchel is arguably held back by his drive for perfection, which can often lead to explosive outbursts against club owners. Despite this, he's widely regarded as one of the most innovative coaches in the modern game. He uses unique training methods to improve the quality of his players. Before we dive into what he did at Borussia Dortmund, PSG, Chelsea and Bayern Munich, let's take a look at his style of play. Thomas Tuchel is tactically very flexible and has used a wide range of formations throughout his career, from back threes to back fours. Tuchel has found use for most modern setups. But regardless of the formation, there are general tactical concepts that are throughout his teams. They often create a back three in possession. Width is held by either wing backs or wingers depending on personnel, and most importantly, the German uses two number 10s, usually creating a sort of 3-2-2-3 attacking structure. Tuchel's style is all about control, either controlling the game by dominating possession or controlling the opposition through pressing. In possession, we see a positional approach, with chances coming from overloading one flank before exploiting the underloaded side with a switch of play. The 3-2-2-3 creates a lot of passing triangles that Tuchel leans on, with passing combination plays creating chances amongst the front three and wide triangles creating crossing situations. The majority of Tuchel's best football involves the number 10s, with them frequently looking to receive in between the lines or making underlapping runs towards the byline and crossing low to teammates. Without the ball, Tuchel is a pragmatic coach who will adjust his defensive block and pressing structure depending on the opposition. But again, there are some constants. Tuchel's defensive block is compact and hard to play through, often setting pressing traps in central midfield. His teams defend the central zone, forcing the opposition to play into the wide areas, and his team adopts zonal man-to-man hybrid system, which can be very, very tough to break down. So it's time to talk tactics. As much as I'd love to go into the Mainz team that Thomas Tuchel built with a 5-4-1 shape, a pentagon press that overperformed in the Bundesliga, I think I'd lose some people. So we're going to start with Borussia Dortmund. The first iteration of his Borussia Dortmund team was built in a 4-1-4-1 structure. Of course, the things we mentioned about Tuchel were very apparent. Number one, playing with two number 10s. In this first iteration, that was the two central midfielders, Gonzalo Castro and Ilkay Gundogan. This shape allowed Dortmund to be really good in every facet of the game. They pressed extremely high off the ball with those two central midfielders, the wingers and the number 9, and they squeezed high with the defensive line. Of course, in terms of interplay and what Thomas Tuchel's teams do, they like to play through the lines to break the opponents to get into the final third. Then when we get there, either we see the wide players getting fed and them running, crossing and getting on the ball, or alternatively we see a lot of underlaps from those three 10s. In terms of this side, they were great to watch, but Thomas Tuchel got the best out of a number of attacking players. Of course, Ilkay Gundogan moved to Manchester City after this season, but Henrik Mkhitaryan went to Manchester United. That season, he was the best right winger on the planet, got 20 assists, the most he's managed in a single season. His ability to carry, to drive in, to drive out, to cross, and create for Aubameyang, Castro and Marco Reus was fantastic. But the key part of this team, of course, was the defensive midfielder. Julian Weigl was the hub of the team. Everything went through him. In fact, in the first season that Thomas Tuchel was manager at Borussia Dortmund, Weigl broke Bundesliga records, completing 199 passes against Cologne. He was the hub of the team, the regista, shall we say. Everything went through him, from the goalkeeper to the centre-backs, to retaining possession, to playing out wide to the full-backs, and then receiving again, and him feeding the players players in between the lines and number 9, even switching to play. Julian Weigl was the key hub of this team. Of course, Borussia Dortmund had to evolve after that summer. Their performances were so good. They were revered around Europe for being one of the fastest teams to watch. They were so quick, they were so good with their interplay, and they created a lot of attacking football. Of course, teams came in and bought their stars. Gundogan to City, Mkhitaryan to Manchester United. What I like about Thomas Tuchel as well is he can adapt his team. Yes, the next season, of course, they brought in Ousmane Dembele from Rennes, they brought Kagawa back to the club, and also Mario Götze. The 4-1-4-1 was still used, but Thomas Tuchel came up with a new solution. A 3-5-2, 3-4-1-2 structure to get the best out of Dembele. Yes, of course, Dembele played some games out wide where he took players on, went on the outside or the inside, shot or crossed, assisting his teammates, especially Aubameyang in the middle. But more interesting with the other system I want to talk about. Of course, we're going to drop one of our midfielders and bring in Marc Bartra, who was signed from Barcelona. Borussia Dortmund also brought in Rafa Guerreiro from Lorient in France, and the system changed. So instead of that 4-1-4-1 structure, what we saw is more of a 3-5-2 or 3-4-1-2, however we want to look at it. So how that was made up, Aubameyang and Marco Reus would be the two strikers in the defensive system, and Dembele in fact played in central midfield defensively, making Borussia Dortmund really hard to play through. We're going to talk about Chelsea tactics a little bit later on and how hard they were to play through, but it's very difficult to break down a team that has 5 defenders, has a 3-man midfield, and 2 forwards that are going to drop in. But when Borussia Dortmund won the ball back, their shape changed. In the transition, they were brilliant, especially with Dembele. He would carry in the transition and be super aggressive on the ball, driving at the opponents and looking to create opportunities to play it through to either of the forwards, Marco Reus or Aubameyang in behind, or alternatively, maybe switch to play and get Guerreiro in behind the opposition's defence in those wide areas. But that shape moved from a defensive 5-3-2 structure to Dembele moving into a number 10 position behind Marco Reus and of course Aubameyang. You'd have the 2-man base made of Castro and Weigl again staggered to allow them to have a number 8 and number 6 to make the opposition's defence open a little bit more, and Guerreiro and Piszczek would provide the width in the final third. What we tended to see as well at certain times, again super fluid, is the 2 number 10s, which would be Dembele inside right or inside left depending on where the ball is, and Marco Reus dropping in off the line, creating again this structure, wing backs wide, 2 number 10s, same types of ideas from a creation perspective, underlaps, wide players being individual, taking their man on or looking for those through balls in behind the defence or getting crosses into the box. This Dortmund iteration was fantastic, and in fact it saw the best seasons for Ousmane Dembele, who was directly involved in 29 goals, but more importantly Aubameyang scored 31 Bundesliga goals in 32 games, his best ever goal scoring season. Tuchel showed at Borussia Dortmund that he was a very, very good coach, could sit deep and counter-attack, could play possession football with Julian Weigl in the 3-8s or 3-10s, however we want to describe them in this system. There'd be width up front, he'd had goals aplenty through the middle, and that is why PSG decided to make a move for the Dortmund man. Thomas Tuchel at PSG played a number of different shapes and systems, from 4-2-4s to 4-3-3s to 3-4-3s. Again, the same things were really apparent in these sides. 2 number 10s, a zonal man approach from a pressing perspective, and trying to make his team be really aggressive. I'd argue that Thomas Tuchel has been the best manager PSG have ever had. He's taken the furthest in the Champions League, losing the final to Hansi Flick's Bayern Munich. Again, tactically set up in a 4-2-4, PSG were really good to watch. They scored a lot of goals. In fact, Kylian Mbappe's best ever season in terms of goal scoring came under Thomas Tuchel. But more importantly, he got the best out of Neymar in Paris. The first setup we're going to look at is the 4-2-4 that Tuchel mainly used against weaker opponents in Ligue 1. That consisted of a back 4, 2 defensive midfielders, 2 wide players, and of course 2 centre forwards. Mbappe and Cavani usually led the line, but we also saw Mbappe play with Icardi at times. But more importantly for me, he got the best out of Neymar in this shape. The shape arguably looked like Neymar playing inside. Again, the 2 number 10 structure. Wan Bernat operating wide on the left-hand side and Di Maria operating wide on the right-hand side. The same setup allowed PSG to build with a back three to allow them to kind of recycle possession out of the back, get it into midfield with Marquinhos, who was playing in midfield for him at that time, and of course Marco Verratti to really have that fluid role of roaming around as a playmaker, knowing that his more defensively minded teammate is going to cover the defence in Marquinhos. Of course, we saw a lot of attacking variation. We saw Mbappe move into different areas. We saw Neymar rotate. But more importantly, Neymar would get him on the ball in really dangerous areas in between the lines, or he'd receive out wide and then drift inside. But the fluidity of the system was really, really good, and they created a lot of chances and scored a lot of goals. Of course, that was PSG's tactic against weaker teams under Thomas Tuchel, really getting as many attackers on the pitch as possible. Arguably 4 forwards, which allowed PSG to destroy most teams in Ligue 1. In terms of the Champions League, there was an adaptability from Thomas Tuchel. And when he got the furthest in the Champions League, in fact, he didn't really play with a centre forward. How he changed it up was he brought on another central midfielder. Ander Herrera left Manchester United and joined PSG and moved into their midfield. What PSG really needed with this kind of shape and setup in the Champions League was a real workmanlike midfield. It needed more of a Liverpool midfield under Jurgen Klopp at the start. Think Fabinho, Wijnaldum and Jordan Henderson. And that's what he built with Paredes coming to join PSG as well, taking the place of Marco Verratti. So what you had was Marquinhos, who'd operate as the sole defensive midfielder. Herrera and Paredes would be real dogged in the final third. Herrera at times would use his box-to-box nature and attack the inside channel, but mainly PSG attacked down the left. Neymar as a false 9, dropping off the line and looking to get balls to receive into feet, to break the opposition's pressing structure, and Mbappe moving to provide that attacking threat in behind, with Juan Bernat once again providing the width on one side and Di Maria on the other side with Ander Herrera's box-to-box nature. But the interesting side as well that I wanted to bring up, interesting tactics from Thomas Tuchel. If you remember the game that they played against Manchester United, in fact Marquinhos operated like a halfback and was dropping in between the two centre-backs. What that gave PSG, again, was building with a back three, which allowed both fullbacks to play a little bit more aggressive and attacking up the pitch. You saw Juan Bernat operate really high with Mbappe kind of in that inside channel, and also you could see Di Maria really drifting from that wide area, getting into that central space. If, for example, Ander Herrera was a little bit deeper in possession, Timo Kehrer or Dani Alves, who remember played for PSG, would provide the width in the final third. And once again, you'd have two number 10s, Di Maria and Mbappe, or Neymar and Mbappe, or Neymar and Di Maria, depending on who's making the runs in behind the opposition's defence. You'd have that solid back three base. You'd have that ability in midfield, that stagnation to draw the opponents on, and this was PSG's best ever team in the Champions League, coming second. But looking into other statistics, Neymar played his best football for me under Thomas Tuchel. In terms of goals and assists, he was about 1.3 goals plus assists per 90. He's only played better football under one coach, and that's Unai Emery, but that was only for a season. He was 2 seasons under Thomas Tuchel in around 67 games, which allowed him to really flourish as the guy at PSG. And arguably took PSG as far as they've ever been in European football. Moving from a successful spell at PSG, Tuchel took the reins at Chelsea after Frank Lampard got sacked at the start of the season. In terms of his tactical setup, he continued with the back three. Chelsea's squad was built for wing-backs, a system that Antonio Conte had used and won the Premier League title with Chelsea. So the squad was quite well built for Thomas Tuchel. But what I liked about Tuchel, once again, was his ability to get the best out of his players, in terms of the setup, building with those back three in terms of ball retention, that lot of space to play through the opponents, and then have a staggered defensive midfield line with Jorginho playing the role, of course, that Julian Weigl did at Borussia Dortmund as that kind of regista, as that playmaker deep. Both wing-backs attacked and would join the attacking line, providing a lot of depth to the team and width in the final third. One of the interesting things, though, with Chelsea, of course, we saw Alonso go on a mad goal-scoring run at Chelsea. What I quite liked that was quite interesting about that, at times we saw Alonso operating in the inside left channel as another goal scorer, moving into that kind of number 10 area when the ball was on the kind of right-hand side of the pitch and Chelsea maybe were attacking through Timo Werner or through Kai Havertz or Reece James just carrying down the byline and putting the ball into the box. But a lot of creation again from those underlaps and getting behind the opposition's defence before sliding balls to centre forwards to finish them off. In fact, if you look at the numbers of Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea, they massively underperformed their expected goals. If you remember that season or the seasons that Thomas Tuchel was manager, the amount of chances that Kai Havertz and Timo Werner would waste were absolutely massive. But of course, Tuchel's biggest success at Chelsea came against Manchester City in the Champions League final. Through the competition, Tuchel had slightly tweaked his tactics. Mason Mount, similar to Ousmane Dembele, was operating more as a central midfielder, and Chelsea would drop back to a 5-3-2 structure when they didn't have the ball. This not only allowed them to press well and high with two centre forwards and have good attacking options into the channels or as options for a through ball, but they could press super aggressively in a rocking motion, that if the ball was attempted to be progressed on the right hand side, Kante could jump and instantly put pressure on the football. This worked really well against Real Madrid in the semi-final, but also against Manchester City in the final. What it allowed as well when Chelsea got into their attacking structure, if they had a bit of possession, both wing backs flying forward. Of course, we saw Ben Chilwell be the guy for the final. You would have a massive amount of rotation. Kai Havertz operating more as a 9, and once again Mason Mount playing a slightly higher position in the inside left. In this game, I thought the pressure was fantastic from Chelsea, the way they squeezed, they sat in that shape, allowing them to have really good coverage with their midfield three, but also from an offensive position. What I liked about it is how they manipulated the City press. In the goal, they drew City into the right-hand side of the shape. The pressure came over from their entire team, and what you saw Chelsea do was play super direct, but take the entire Man City team out. Of course, City were pressing with Phil Foden, Kevin De Bruyne in their kind of 4-4-2 structure. But one of their weaknesses that season that Chelsea had found out previously in a game in the league was you could basically draw them over to the right-hand side of your shape, quickly switch the ball back through, look for a long ball to the left-hand side. That would basically call the entire team back over. And then what you'd see is massive space in between the centre-backs, a lack of defensive coverage as well from midfield, which meant you could drop a ball back into the attacking midfield zone and then look for a through ball in behind the defence. And that's exactly how Chelsea scored the only goal of that Champions League final. Something that Thomas Tuchel had seen drilled into his players, a switch of play, dropping it back inside and then runners off the ball. Thomas Tuchel, masterclass in the Champions League final, got Chelsea their second Champions League trophy. All came from his tactics, but his ability to see a squad, to improve it and beat the likes of Real Madrid on the way to lifting that trophy. Of course, in this structure, just going back to the over tactical side of it, the width was held by wing-backs in this setup. Of course, Ben Chilwell, Reece James, or of course Alonso. The 10s were, either Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Mason Mount, the double pivot made of Jorginho and Kante, and a lot of controlling positional play was used in the Premier League. Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel for me were a great side, and in fact I think if Chelsea had got their recruitment correct and not signed Romelu Lukaku as the new number 9, they could have challenged for the Premier League title. In his only full season as Chelsea manager, Tuchel came third. And we mentioned before, they massively underperformed their expected goals. But you don't want a striker like Lukaku. Lukaku, for me, is a channel striker. Tuchel wants a 9 that can receive into his feet and play his teammates in or bounce passes off. Not a player that is excellent in the transition and in the channels, like, of course, Romelu Lukaku, who looks world-class under managers like Antonio Conte, that sit defensive, sit deep, and then hit you on the break. Tuchel needed a different style of number 9, and arguably that's why he fell out with the Chelsea board. And finally, Bayern Munich, probably Thomas Tuchel's most disappointing season in recent years. At Bayern Munich, he very much set them up in a 4-2-3-1, the classic Bayern shape. I think one of the things that Thomas Tuchel did in Bavaria was not change his system enough. We mentioned before, Tuchel likes to change things. He likes to keep the opposition guessing. Is he going to play a back three, a back four? How many players are going to be in midfield? Who's going to be the number 10s? But we kind of saw Tuchel operating with a 4-2-3-1 in most games. Only 2 times in the entire season did he play a back three. And one of those games came against Leverkusen, who were playing a back three all season and obviously won the league. I think the big concern for Thomas Tuchel coming into this job was moving the side on. Of course, the double pivot of Joshua Kimmich and Leon Goretzka has been Bayern's default for the last sort of 5 years. The big thing there is Leon Goretzka's mobility is kind of dropping off, and the big criticism that Tuchel had with the squad is he needed to move them on and he needed new players. One of the big players that he needed was a ball-winning midfielder. This is something that he'd said at the start of the season, in the middle of the season, and of course Bayern Munich in the summer signed João Paulinho. That was something they tried to get over the line under Thomas Tuchel. But I think Thomas Tuchel's spell at Bayern Munich, tactically they looked quite good. You saw at times Leroy Sané inside, Alphonso Davies operating wide, Musiala as one of the 10s, and Kingsley Coman operating as a winger in the final third, with Kimmich in the latter parts of the season operating as a fullback, either getting inside on the ball or operating on the overlap. But overall, I think this Bayern team really struggled with individual errors. A lot of the games where Bayern Munich completely imploded, we saw centre-backs giving the ball away, Manuel Neuer being sloppy out of the back, and this team really didn't look like a Thomas Tuchel side, whether the message wasn't going through to the players, and of course it fell apart pretty early on. Saying that though, Harry Kane scored more goals in the league than he's ever managed in a single campaign. The only season he scored over 30 goals in a single campaign. So Bayern did create a lot of chances, they scored a lot of goals in certain games, but the overall blend of the season wasn't great. But I think when reflecting on Thomas Tuchel's time at Bayern Munich could have been better, but that doesn't make him a bad coach. I think this one instance of a team massively needing an overhaul, but also a squad that had so many individual errors in a single season can't be exactly down to the manager. Tuchel has shown at Chelsea, at PSG, at Borussia Dortmund and Mainz that he's a world-class coach. So overall, Thomas Tuchel's tactics have key principles. 2 number 10s, playing attacking football, controlling the game through possession or through pressing. But more importantly, Thomas Tuchel has improved some of the best attacking players on the planet. You're looking at best seasons for the likes of Ousmane Dembele, Henrik Mkhitaryan, Aubameyang at Borussia Dortmund. At PSG, you're seeing Mbappe having his best goal-scoring season. You're probably seeing the best of Neymar. Of course, at Chelsea, we saw Mason Mount really strive in Thomas Tuchel's flexible system, having a role deep in midfield in a defensive sense, and then moving to attacking midfield when he's on the ball. And of course, Harry Kane scored the most goals ever managed in a single league campaign under Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel is ready for his next step in management, and by God, is he a good coach. But anyway, guys, what have you thought of Thomas Tuchel's tactics so far? Let me know in the comments below. I've been Statman Dave. Subscribe if you're new. We'll see you later.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, why not check out some more content on the Statman Dave YouTube channel.